Hello, and welcome back to the Steel Woman podcast. I'm your host, Osley, and today I'm going to be talking about the things that I liked about my religion, Christianity, which I am no longer a member of. I'm also going to be talking about the cons. So I know it's not just going to be smooth sailing, all positive reviews. I definitely want to go into the pros and cons of the things that I liked about my religion while I was in it. So it should be interesting. It should be fun. Hopefully it's balanced. Hopefully it's a good time. All right, let's jump right in. The first thing that I liked. Oh, wait, actually, I put in my notes, loved, so maybe we'll go with that. The first thing that I loved about my religion was the community aspect. Community is something that I really did enjoy about Christianity, my denomination being really Reformed Baptist. You have this community that's just built into your belief system, like you know that you have something in common with a lot of people right off the bat, and you have the same sort of routine and expectations. It's just easy to make friends and have that community. Also, I found that a lot of the friendships that I built in church because of church were built around this sense of encouraging one another in your walk with the Lord, but more practically speaking, just in your everyday life. People were there for each other because that was expected, and that was just a part of our religious practice, was to be neighborly and hospitable and help your fellow man, which I think all those things are great. Another aspect of having this community that I really enjoyed was sharing what's going on with people, feeling permission to do that. I really like connecting with people on a deeper level. And whenever I would go to Bible study or we'd have prayer meetings or just pray for each other, I felt like it was the right time and a good opportunity to share what was going on in my life and to open up, and other people did it. It was reciprocal. I enjoyed that too. It made connections happen much more quickly. I also liked the aspect of community that was, the good old potlucks, everyone getting together and sharing food, and the kids playing, playing ultimate frisbee, hanging out. That was fun. It was just like this built-in perk to having this religion, is you just got to hang out and have free food, play games, and for the most part, you trusted the people in your community because they were Christian. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. Something else I liked about being a Christian was, at the end of the day, the most important thing was our relationship with God, and it was all about God's glory. And it was something that really held us all together, even when we had differences of opinions and things, or different interests. That was the most important thing, and it was really the glue that bound us all together. So that's very quickly a rundown of all the aspects of community that I really enjoy. But now we need to get into the cons, because even as I'm talking about the pros, I'm just thinking about the cons. There's so many things to say. The first one is that, yes, even though God and our desire to glorify God bound us all together like glue, didn't necessarily have shared interests with people in church. And outside of Bible study, outside of going to church and doing church activities, there's really nothing that I would have wanted to do with a lot of the friends that I had. Like, we just weren't similar. And I think that made it really difficult to have a genuine companionship relationships where you want to go do things together and just live life together. It felt kind of forced sometimes. Not every relationship, but some relationships it felt like this obligation to be friendly and hang out and be friends, even though neither of you even probably wanted to, but it felt kind of like you were supposed to, because you're in the same religion, and it's a good testimony to Christianity for everyone to get along and be friends. That put some pressure on me at times, where I was like, man, I just don't really get along with that person, but I'm a Christian and they're a Christian, so whatever. I don't think that's necessary. I think there's literally billions of people in the world. You don't have to get along with everyone. You don't have to be friends with everyone. You should be kind to everyone. But I think it makes a lot of sense to just be friends with people that you have stuff in common with. I think everyone's going to enjoy that time spent together much more than if you're forcing connections that your religion makes you feel like you need to have. Another con of community was just this judgment, even within one church, within a single denomination of one religion, right? You had so many different opinions. So within one congregation, you'd have some people wearing long skirts, not allowed to wear pants. Maybe the women aren't allowed to pray publicly, whatever. Each family would have different rules, and sometimes that could cause a little bit of tension between the people in the congregation. It's just the truth, it just happens. And sometimes this tension would turn into this judgment. Like you just kind of knew that, like, okay, those people judge us, and we kind of low-key judge them for judging us. But we can't talk about it because we got to keep the peace. And so this tension would arise in church, and then cliques would form. And, I know that kind of contradicts my previous point of feeling like you had to have connections with people that you don't like. Cliques would form. But there was just this tension that I think arose from people being in a congregation together and having different interpretations of the Bible and different convictions. One of the issues that I felt judged for in high school going to church, and something I saw other girls being judged for, was what they would wear. Either I would hear people talking about it, like, I can't believe she wore that short of a dress, or like, oh, I can't believe she wore a strapless shirt. Whatever it was talked about, it was muttered about, and then I felt pressure too, like, oh, am I being judged for wearing jeans to church? Am I not allowed to do that? Is that distracting? Is some man behind me looking at my butt? Like, there's just judgment. And I mean, to be fair, I think that exists in many walks of life, in many communities. Judgment is a thing. But that's definitely one of the things that I did not enjoy about having a church community, is just you never really knew what your fellow brothers and sisters felt convicted about. And you were kind of walking on eggshells because you didn't want to cause them to stumble with your spiritual liberation to do the thing that they couldn't do. You know what I'm saying? Another con... this might be a little controversial, having a church version of myself. And maybe I'm the only one who did this. Well, I know I'm not the only one who did this, but maybe this is rare. I felt like showing up in church, I had to be the squeaky clean version of myself, never say a bad word, probably not even really talk about secular movies and TV shows within church, especially not at Bible study. I mean, I would slip up every now and then, but there was this self that I would put on to show up to church and Bible study that wasn't my most authentic self. And this really started becoming apparent to even myself when I went to college, and I had friends at college that I felt very comfortable with, that I could talk about anything with certain of these friends and not feel judged, and we'd laugh together and have a good time. But then church friends, there's no way in hell I could have talked about the same things that I was talking about with my college friends. So yeah, that made me feel inauthentic. It also made me question, like, who am I really? And there was just, confusion there. I felt like it wasn't safe or right for me to be who I really was in all situations. And I don't know. So I know some Christians will probably say it's because you weren't a true Christian, you were fake, or whatever. I mean, I don't. That's fine if you think that. I mean, look at the way we dress going to church. You put on your Sunday best and you smile, and there's this effort of showing up as your best self when maybe inside you just really feel lousy and unhappy and angry, and you just don't feel free to show that because you don't want to be a bad testimony of Christ. I think that's what truly makes it a con, is this pressure to show up. I am all put together. Look at my amazing family and la la la. Why are we putting pressure on each other? Anyways, the last con about community was definitely a personal problem that I had of feeling morally obligated to go to church and to fellowship. I'm introverted, and yeah, sometimes I just wouldn't want to go to Bible study, or I wouldn't want to go to church. I wouldn't want to fellowship, but I felt like I was supposed to. I felt like, there's that verse that says, don't forsake the meeting of the saints, and I felt like, I need to do this. This is my little contribution. I need to show up, and I need, and not just for me, but for others. Like, maybe I won't benefit from this, but other people will. Okay, I'll show up. I'm really glad to leave that behind, because I don't think anyone should ever feel morally obligated to hang out with people. Like, that doesn't really even make sense. People will be fine if you're not there, but there was this pressure to show up to things, to potlucks, Bible studies, things like that. You don't have to. Of course, I don't think you should be a flake. If you said you're going to show up, you probably need to show up. But in general, I don't think you should be overcommitting yourself because you think it's a moral obligation. But I do think that religion can, in some cases, create that pressure. All right, let's keep it moving. Let's kind of move quick because I have a lot. The second thing that I loved about my religion was prayer. Whenever I would pray, I would feel this immediate peace wash over me. And it makes a lot of sense why I would have felt that peace, because I was convinced at the time that I had this two-way connection with God, the Almighty, the creator of the universe, and that he would listen to me and that he loved me, right? And that I was supposed to leave all my burdens at his feet. And still, that idea is beautiful. Like, it truly is. The idea of praying and leaving your burdens at the feet of the Almighty God. Like, that is a beautiful thing. I will still admit that it's beautiful. I'm not convinced that that is reality anymore. That's why I don't do it. But yeah, it is beautiful, and it always gave me that immediate peace. Also, talking out loud about my problems was really, really helpful. So if I was ever going through a hard time and I went someplace to be alone to pray, I'm voicing my problems out loud. I'm processing it. I'm getting it out. It's very healing. And I think this is one of the reasons why therapy is so beneficial, because you're speaking these things out loud, getting them out. And I talked about this a little bit in my last podcast episode. I think there's so much benefits of just sitting down and talking about your problems out loud, even to yourself. So prayer did that. And I really felt like I was being listened to, which was that's what you want, right? You want to feel like someone's hearing you and seeing you and loving you for who you are. Also, people praying for me felt really healing. So if I would ask for prayer, like, can you pray for me? Just knowing that this person was praying for me, which of course, I guess you can't know if someone's actually praying for you, but thinking that this person is praying for you, maybe they tell you, hey, I'm praying for you. That is very comforting, especially when you believe, which at the time I was convinced, that prayer works miracles, that it is powerful. And yeah, also, just people coming together and praying over you, praying together in a room, that's really powerful. I get it. I get why people have these experiences of, these mystical experiences when everyone is in a room together praying. It does feel really powerful. And I don't know exactly why. I don't know the science behind that. I don't think that it is exclusive or unique to Christianity. I think in general, when people gather together with an intention to connect and love one another, mystical, magical things happen. It's beautiful. And that is something that I loved about my religion. Okay, the cons, though, was when I would pray, I wasn't addressing root issues. So if I had anxiety about something repeatedly, which I did, I had certain things I would kind of obsess over, I wasn't getting to the root issue. I was just trying to leave my anxieties at God's feet, hoping that he would take care of it. And even though it gave me peace in the moment, it wasn't addressing the root issue that would make it continue to happen in the future. Right? It wasn't a really effective technique long term. It was just kind of a band-aid. Therapy has been much more helpful to me than prayer ever was. Reading about the type of problems that I have, reading about techniques and tips to overcome anxiety and depression, why you might be anxious, doing shadow work, all of those things have done way more for me than prayer ever did. So there's that. Another con would be prayer is often substituted for action. So sometimes I would pray for a person and that was my little excuse to not actually have to go and help them. Or sometimes I would pray my own sins away, pray for forgiveness rather than taking accountability and going and fixing it. I think I gave way too much credit to prayer to do all the hard work for me rather than taking action. And I think that this is a problem in general. Oh, I'll pray for you. It's like, okay, yeah, but maybe also help. You know what I'm saying? Like, just an example, if I saw someone being mugged, I wouldn't pray for them. I would call the police. I would yell. I would run over to help them. I would take action. In that moment, intuitively, I would know, like, I need to take action. And I think that somehow when there's other problems like disease or someone lost a job or someone needs money or someone's feeling sad, instead of trying to do something that they need, that they're telling you that they need, you're just like, I'll pray for you. And it's like a cop-out. It's kind of an introvert's wet dream, honestly, because you're like, oh, I can just pray for people from a distance. So actually, I kind of miss that as an excuse to just pray for people and not have to get down in the nitty-gritty. But I know that that's a bad thing. I know that that was a crutch, and I know that action is way more effective than just sending good vibes. It's hard. Okay, you can't help every single person. And if you get on the news right now and you search up all the horrible things going on in the world, you will be overwhelmed with how many people need help and all the things that there are to do. And I don't believe in overwhelming yourself to a point where it leads to inaction. I think that's really detrimental. But why am I talking so quickly? All right, chill. Okay. But I do think that taking action as a principle over just sending good vibes and sending prayers is something we need to be doing and examining in our own lives. And I try to do that too as a hermit introvert. So yeah. Oh, toxic prayer meeting groups. This is a con of prayer. I think they encourage oversharing and becoming vulnerable with people who might be predatory. Now, this might be only some cases, not every time, be careful, whatever. But I think that there's just some obvious problems with public, big prayer groups. Even like 20 people, anyone can show up, right? And if people are sharing like really deep stuff that maybe they should be talking about with a therapist, that can be weaponized to hurt that person, or it's just like not everyone needs to know that, and now everyone knows it and might go gossip about it. I don't know. Okay, some people have no problems airing out their dirty laundry and being like completely 100% transparent about every part of their life. I mean, there's people out there. Get on TikTok. There's people who share so much that I'm just like, oh my God. And I share quite a lot too, but I only share what I'm comfortable with. What I think gets toxic with these public prayer groups is that you feel pressure to share more than you're comfortable with. And that's different for everybody. Everyone has a different threshold of what they feel comfortable sharing. For example, someone might feel completely comfortable sharing, hey, I relapsed with alcohol or something. I need you guys to pray for me. And somebody else might be like, oh my God, I cannot believe they just said that publicly. That's so embarrassing. I could never say that. Oh, but now I feel like I need to say something, and I've been struggling with my porn addiction. So maybe I should just confess that to everybody in the room that I watched porn last night. And then it is just like, oh, but I don't feel comfortable sharing that, but the Holy Spirit's convicting me. And then you have people sharing stuff that just like didn't need to be shared with 20 people. I mean, it's fine that it was shared with 20 people, but I think what's a problem is when there's people who feel, that pressure to share, even though they're not comfortable. Or this kind of bothers me too, when someone's really vulnerable, and then you can tell that they're kind of ticked off at this other person who wasn't vulnerable. You should open up more. You should, and it's like, no, you don't have to. I think it can get kind of toxic quickly. Plus, when the prayers are asked about another person, maybe who isn't present, at that point, are we just gossiping? Sharing very private information of other individuals to look like we have the inside scoop. Like, did they want you to share that? I don't know. I am extremely sensitive to those sorts of things, and I think it can become a problem. I think anything, I don't know. I wonder how people will. Do you agree? Is this just me? Is it just my own trust issues talking here? Maybe, and that's fine. But that's my opinion. The next thing that I really loved about my religion was rituals. What are rituals? Okay, so a few examples would be just the act of going to church, the Lord's Supper, singing songs together, reading the Bible in Bible studies together, praying for people, lots of things that became habit. It gave structure and meaning to my life, and I do think that rituals are really healthy for humans, and I'm working on developing some rituals now in my life that aren't necessarily like spiritual or anything, but make me feel aligned with some sort of intention. And I just think that's really healthy. So the Lord's Supper is an example. We would do this probably about once a month at my church, where the wafers would be passed around, the grape juice would be passed around, and the scriptures of the Lord's Supper would be read, and we would drink them all together. Singing, I loved singing. That is honestly one of the things that I miss because it's super powerful. And I'm thinking maybe I need to go to some concerts to like I don't know, fill that void in me a little bit. Singing is always so fun. A sense of belonging. You are cooperating with the rest of the people. That feels good. It feels good to do what everyone else is doing and have this sense of like group conformity. I think a lot of times we talk about group conformity as being negative, like, oh, you're just a sheep. But it is kind of fun to all get together and do the same thing together with the same intention and purpose. That can be really special. Also, praying before a meal, just having that quiet moment before you eat together, where you're sending gratitude to God, and you're just sending gratitude to each other and the people who made the meal. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful ritual. I really love that. Once again, we've gone through the pros very quickly. Now we're on to the cons. Lord's Supper. Clear con, cannibalism. A lot of people believe that we're actually eating the flesh. Maybe not a lot of people. It's like one denomination. But even symbolically, it's symbolically cannibalistic. And I do find that really weird now that like everyone is eating flesh and drinking blood. It's like, what? It was beautiful at the time and it meant a lot to me, but now that I haven't been doing it for so long, we really used to do that and no one bat an eye. Or I didn't, Also the shame that the Lord's Supper brought on. Every single time I took the Lord's Supper, I was reminded of Jesus' crucifixion, and that's what I would really be thinking about before I would be eating the flesh and the blood, symbolically, metaphorically, spiritually. I don't know what kind of mood this is today, but we're going with it. I would always be thinking about Jesus' crucifixion and how kind of technically my fault. It's my sin. Yes, we fell in Adam, but also Jesus died for things that I had yet to do. I hadn't done yet. He died for those. It's my fault. I pierced his hand with those nails. I spit on him. I was there spiritually. That was kind of the doctrine I was raised on. And so there was a lot of this shame, especially during like the build up before you actually ate the flesh and drank the blood. And then of course when you ate it, when you took the Lord's Supper, there was this feeling of being washed and forgiven, but still like shame was a big part of that ritual for me. Just reminding myself what a unworthy piece of shit I was, and that this was necessary in order for me to even be worthy of forgiveness. So yeah, that was definitely shame. Ooh, this was something else that really bothered me. I don't know if it bothered me at the time. I can't remember now. Like the lines are blurred, but I thought about this the other day. Whenever people would take the Lord's Supper, in my church, you weren't allowed to take it unless you were saved. And what being saved meant is that you had made a public acknowledgement that you were a sinner. You'd made a public dedication of your life to Christ, and a public baptism. That's what it meant, as far as I know. I mean, that's what I had to do, and that's what I saw other people doing. And so all the people who hadn't done that really were discouraged from taking the Lord's Supper. Now, no one would have like come and like beat you over the head with a bat if you took it. But I do remember it being mentioned a few times before the Lord's Supper. This is for God's children. This is for people who have chosen to follow Jesus. This is for people who have been baptized. Don't take it if you're not a follower of Jesus, essentially. So yeah, people could choose what they wanted to do, but yeah, I don't know. And so I do remember kind of looking around, who isn't taking it? And just making a mental note in my head that those were the people who, if they died right now, would go to hell. And that's a little bit traumatizing. I don't remember being traumatized. I just remember being like, oh, interesting. Like it was just numb to it, I think. But it's just kind of funny. It makes me giggle now that I felt this, ooh, man. So, hopefully they don't die because they didn't have it. There was also pressure. So before I got baptized, I wasn't allowed, well, in my family, I wasn't allowed to take it. Yeah. That's actually kind of crazy that I wasn't allowed. I mean, I never asked, but I wasn't under the impression that I could take it without being baptized. Yeah, it's just interesting. That makes me a little uncomfy. Anyway, I totally lost my train of thought on that one. I just remembered that. Anyways, every time the Lord's Supper happened, it was a reminder that I would go to hell if I died in that moment because I wasn't saved yet. I had made a public, dedication to God. So that's the con of the Lord's Supper. So there's cons within cons. There's points within the cons. I'm trying, you guys. I'm trying. Okay. Tithing. Okay, tithing is a ritual that I don't think has really any redeeming value. I don't know if I can say that. That's a little much. There may be some. In general, tithing just icks me out. Ick. And the reason is because I was taught that, 100% of what you have belongs to God, but He only asks for 10%. That automatically put me in a state of like, I have to give 10%. And if I don't give 10%, I'm not even doing the bare minimum. All my money belongs to God. And so it felt very, what's the word? I felt compelled to do it, even if I really didn't want to, or even if I wasn't in a place financially where I should be tithing. I think it's really unhelpful to people who are in a rough spot financially, who go to church, to hear that being preached from the pulpit, because you're having to prioritize God over maybe your children. I don't know. I think it's really unfair. I think tithing should be optional, but I think the very concept of tithing, it isn't really optional. Of course, no pastor, well, maybe some pastors, no pastor that I ever had like called me out and said, hey, I noticed you haven't been paying. No one ever did that to me. So in that way, it wasn't mandated, it wasn't enforced. But from the pulpit, it was just pressured. And I'm very sensitive to that. I'm very sensitive to manipulation and pressure. I don't like it. It very easily makes me feel guilty. And I feel like it does to other people too. And I just wish that tithing were more of like, hey, you can give 10%, but don't feel like you have to. You need to make sure that your family is okay before you're giving to God. But I just don't think any pastor really, I never heard a pastor say that. So sometimes I wouldn't tithe, but then again, it's that guilt. It's like, oh, and then I need to make up for it later. I really don't think it's a good thing. But I also understand that that's how a church survives. That's how they make their money, is from gifts, from tithing, and that's a really important part of religion. I mean, that's just something you're kind of signing up for when you're a part of a religion, in my opinion. At least most religions I've heard of, you have to, give money. And so, yeah, I think that's just part of a religion, and that's definitely not something that I love. All right, moving on. So the next thing that I loved about my religion was the certainty that it gave me. So when I was a Christian, I believed in spiritual truth, objective truth with a capital T, and really just spiritual truth with a capital T. And I thought that God was truth. And that's what I was taught. I mean, that was what was taught in my church, is that the world has versions of truth that they like to call their truth, your truth, but that's all, BS. There's only one truth, and that is God, and that is the Bible. And I think now that statement is actually just, I cannot see how anyone could say that anymore, because Christianity itself and the Bible itself has so many different interpretations. How could you possibly say that it is the one truth? Like, that doesn't make sense to me anymore. I guess you really do have to be a fundamentalist Christian in order to believe that there is one capital T Christian truth. You would have to think that your own interpretation is the one right interpretation in order to say something like that. That there's no ambiguity, there's no gray areas, it's just black and white, I'm right and everyone's wrong. I don't, and maybe I'm missing something here, and if I am, feel free to let me know. What do Christians mean when they say there is only one truth and it's God? Why don't you ask your congregation about the Bible and what they think it means? Take that poll and see if they all have the same interpretation. And then why don't you take a poll of theologians, even within your own denomination, and see what they think? And then go outside of that to other denominations, see what they think. Do you really think everyone's going to come back with the exact same answer? I think when I was a Christian, I would have thought, well, no, not in every single part of the Bible, but with the main things, yes. That we're sinners deserving of death, but Christ paid the price by dying on the cross for our sins, and he's coming back. Those are the three capital T truth claims, maybe, and everything else is just up for debate. But I was very narrow-minded at that time because there were Christians. Was that necessary? But still, at the time when I thought that those claims were agreed upon by everyone, I didn't know about the other denominations of Christianity that don't agree on those claims. For example, preterists. I think that's what they're called, preterists, who believe that the Bible, the biblical prophecies have all been fulfilled, and the Bible wasn't even written to us. It was written to those people back in the day. And we're actually living in the end times or something. I don't know. Go look it up. But preterists believe that all the prophecies of the Bible have already been fulfilled. I know that for sure. And that the Bible really doesn't apply to us. And they're Christian. Mormons are Christian. I can already hear, the fundamentalist evangelical Christians going, no, they're not. They're not true Christians. But it's just like, it's funny because how are you going to prove them wrong with your capital T truth version of Christianity? How are you going to demonstrate that? Even within fundamentalist Christianity, there's so many contradictions of ideas. I'm not just talking about scriptural contradictions, but within ideas, that it's like, why do you think that's true if it doesn't even make sense? Okay, I don't know if I'm being a little sassy here. Okay, so yeah, I believed in spiritual truth with a capital T, and I believe that my denomination had the monopoly on truth. Again, yeah, that fundamentalist mindset where I thought certain denominations of Christianity weren't valid because they disagreed on certain theological matters. I don't believe that anymore because it doesn't make sense. That's pretty much simple, but I'm still supposed to be on the pros. Okay, but at the time, it gave me a lot of peace to think that I was right, that I had unlocked the answers to the deep mysteries of the universe, that I had a connection with the divine. That made me feel really good. It gave me a lot of peace. It did, and I think that makes sense. I don't think should be confusing to anybody why that would bring me a lot of peace. It felt really good that I was automatically right just because I was in a relationship with God. I'm automatically right, and all the other belief systems, all the other religions, yeah, they're wrong, but I am completely right. And when I tell you guys, I really didn't struggle with my faith for most of my Christian walk. I struggled with certain questions about what was right and wrong according to the Bible, but I believed in God and I believed in Jesus and I believed I had a relationship with him. Those were things that I was 100% certain of. And when I say 100%, I mean 100%. And that made me feel extreme confidence. I also enjoyed the certainty that religion gave me for an afterlife. So I was fully expecting to die and go straight to heaven and spend the rest of my eternal life there in bliss. And so I really wasn't worried too much about what happened to me here on earth. This is just a blip. This is just a clip for what's coming. This is just the preview. Heaven's going to be amazing. It gave me such peace. I also had clear certainty and direction when it came to moral dilemmas. So I knew what was right, I knew what was wrong. I had very clear political stances on things because of my interpretation of the Bible and my fundamentalist background. But again, I felt correct to a point where I was progressive Christians, I don't know if they're real Christians, because their views differed slightly from mine. And I was so certain that I was correct, my religion gave me that certainty, that I would just sort of write other people off as being lost and deceived. But I was right. And I know, it sounds so delusional. Even as I'm saying it, I'm that's kind of cringe and embarrassing. But that was the truth. I was so certain that I was right. And everyone else is wrong. It's gross. But the cons of this, clearly, as we're leading into, is arrogance, bigotry, closed-mindedness. I was so arrogant. I was probably a nightmare to be around in a lot of ways, because I'm sure that spilled over into other areas of my life. I don't know. I probably really couldn't have been friends with myself. But no, I won't say that. She was doing her best. At the time. I also think it created this high capacity for doing actual tangible harm to others in the name of this spiritual understanding, this spiritual apprehension of divine teachings. A good example of this is voting to take away rights from the LGBTQ. I would have done that in a heartbeat. I did that. I voted against the LGBTQ community having rights. And you know why I did that? Because I thought that I was right. I was certain that I had the correct interpretation of the Bible, and that God hates, the LGBTQ, what they stand for, not the people, just the sin, right? That was my thing at the time. And so I was living in a way and acting in a way, voting in a way that was actively harming people groups. Because in my opinion, what's actually harming them is their sin. Spiritually, it's harming them spiritually. They're going to go to hell. So the least I can do is vote against them being able to do something that's going to make them go to hell. I'm actually helping them. You think I'm harming you? No, I'm actually helping you. I twisted it on its head completely because I was operating on the spiritual realm rather than actual physical data, which, if LGBTQ community, the rates of self-harm, the rates of anxiety and depression go up when they're in communities that are against them, when they don't have rights. And of course, obviously, when you take away a person's rights, are they going to be happier? No, obviously. Why is it even up for debate? Of course, now I know that the harm I was doing was unacceptable. It's unacceptable. It sucks to even know that, I was a part of the problem and I did actual real harm when I was a Christian. But I think it's important to talk about and acknowledge because, at the very least, what I wish that I would have done is separate my religion from my politics. I am not one to judge. I could be wrong. Maybe there's an interpretation of the Bible that actually is in favor of the LGBTQ community. Whatever. It actually doesn't matter. I'm going to take my religion out and I'm going to vote for people to be able to do what they want to do in consensual relationships with others. I wish I had made it that simple, but I couldn't because, again, I thought that I had the one spiritual truth with a capital T, and it was my fundamentalist interpretation of the Bible. And there was no way that I was going to risk God's wrath being angry at me for voting in favor of the LGBTQ community at that time. I was way too scared. I think it's really important to understand, this is the logic that a lot of fundamentalist Christians are operating under. That's why they will do harm to people. And by harm, I mean a parent disowning their child for being gay. That is very harmful. But they will do it because they think that they are not harming them spiritually. And that spiritual harm is way more impactful than actual tangible harm, which of course cannot be proven. And that's what scares me, is if we're operating under this, what is spiritually harmful versus what is actually physically harmful reflected in the data, then you can argue for anything. That terrifies me. But I was in that same belief system and logic logic mindset for a long time. And so I think understanding that hopefully will give people a better insight into why some Christians, not all, again, not all, but like the fundamentalist Christians vote in the ways that they do, stripping people of their rights. Coming at them in anger is really not going to change their mind. I think you have to just explain it to them calmly. Hey, separation of church and state. Everyone needs to be able to practice their own religion and do what is right to them. You can't prove that being gay is sinful. Plus, it doesn't even make sense talking about sin in a political environment. It really only makes sense to talk about, actual tangible harm and protecting people. So no, you should not be voting against these people's rights. But okay. Another con that came along with my high level of certainty that I actually loved having while I was in religion was this fear of being proved wrong, which I know is kind of ironic because it's like, well, if you were certain, then you shouldn't have been afraid to be proven wrong. Yes, but me personally, I thought it was possible to be proven wrong, but not because I was actually wrong, but because Satan is tricky. Satan is deceptive. And so I'm not going to waste my time, trying to argue with science people or atheists, because Satan is deceptive and maybe, he does lead people astray. So I have to trust God beyond a shadow of a doubt, even when evidence is presented to me to the contrary. Yeah, it might seem like you're wrong, but it's you can't trust that. You only trust God. You can't trust your own understanding. Even if, aliens landed in front of you and said, hey, we're aliens from another planet and God doesn't exist, you can't believe that because that would just be Satan. Set up to be so paranoid about Satan that I was very, very skeptical of anything that made it look like Christianity was not true. So that's kind of where I was, and that was a major problem that came with that certainty, because my certainty was not rational. My certainty was indoctrinated into me. Another con that came with this high level of certainty was the way that I attached my identity to this belief system. I was a Christian first and foremost. I was a child of God first and foremost. And this resulted in me not developing my own identity as a person. I had an identity crisis after leaving Christianity. While I was leaving it, I remember crying, who am I without this? I had just realized that the Bible wasn't divinely inspired, and I just realized that it really wasn't a great moral guide either, because I was reading the Old Testament and I was horrified and disgusted. I remember saying, who am I without this? And I don't really feel like that anymore. I feel like I have found who I am and I'm continuing to find her. But yeah, that high level of certainty, attaching my identity to something where I would have died for it. I was so certain that I would have died for it. That made it really, I took things really personally. I took criticisms of Christianity extremely personally, and I wouldn't hear them. I would go into hyper defensive mode. This high level of certainty that I had made me vulnerable to conspiracy theories and just paranoia in general. So I bought into a lot of conspiracy theories that are, silly. Like, why would you believe that? And I won't go into them because they're not important, and I don't want this whole video to be about the conspiracy theories. But I was so much more likely to accept something without proof if it aligned with the beliefs that I had about the Bible, like whether it be prophecies or just conspiracies that furthered this idea that, Satan was among us and demons were among us. It was very paranoid. And, I truly believed in spiritual warfare to a point where if somebody in the church did something bad, it's like, well, I'm sure he was just experiencing a lot of spiritual warfare, especially if he was a pastor or something. It's like, oh, well, the warfare is even worse for them. And I think, it just created a lot of paranoia that Satan's always around and you can't trust even your own thoughts. You can't, because of demons and God, be careful what you think, be careful what you say, because you might attract demons. That was a really uncomfy way to live. That I don't think that was good for me at all. Because there's no evidence of that. There's no hard evidence of that. In every religion, there exists forms of, this spirit and this bad guy and this happens to you, but it's like there's no data for that. There's only, and maybe it's true. Look, if I get proven wrong and these things actually exist, Like if aliens really do exist or interdimensional beings truly exist, demons exist, then I will be proven wrong. It will just happen because I accept evidence. I don't accept claims that aren't supported by evidence. So I'm open to being proven wrong. It just hasn't happened yet. I've just heard a lot of stories, and conflicting stories at that. The final thing that I loved about my religion was forgiveness. This idea of being washed clean. So I mentioned earlier about the Lord's Supper, how there was a lot of shame surrounding that. But once I actually partook of the flesh and blood, I felt clean. I felt like I was forgiven. There was this idea that grace was ever abounding before and in front of me, covering all of my sins because of Christ and what he had done on the cross. And this was just a beautiful, peaceful idea that God would look at me and only see what Christ had done for me, and he wouldn't judge me. That was a good feeling. So it was this feeling of being accepted, that I had a fresh start no matter what I'd done. So I could be a horrible person, but Jesus's blood covers all, right? And also this idea that no one is unredeemable. So yeah, even if someone like Jeffrey Dahmer, unfortunately, if he could be forgiven. Everyone could be forgiven. Hitler, all of us. None of us were too far gone to be just washed clean by Jesus's blood. All you had to do was accept that you were a sinner and pray to him, and you'd be good, and you could go to heaven for eternity. I mean, that's a really lovely idea, especially for someone who doesn't want to put in a lot of work and take accountability. Which leads us straight into the cons. Limited accountability for myself and for others. This idea of being magically, miraculously washed clean through a blood sacrifice without you technically having to do anything other than accept that you need it and accept the gift really fosters, in my opinion, this spirit of just lacking accountability and of saying, well, I'll just repent of that later. Or, it doesn't matter what I do because Jesus loves me. And I know there's a verse in the New Testament that says, we shouldn't sin because of this grace. No. And I think there's conflicting verses on that too, actually. Like some verses you could use to say that we do need works to get to heaven, and some verses we could use to say you don't need to do anything to get to heaven other than accept the free gift and the free offer. And I'm not here to debate that, but what I think it does, this idea of a blood sacrifice washing your sins clean, from 2,000 years ago. For me, I'll speak for myself. That's always a simple thing to do. For me, I don't think I was encouraged to take accountability as much. And not in a negative way. And actually in an empowering way. There's so much that you can do to heal past wrongs, to make things right, to change. It's very empowering actually to know that I can do things to make what I've done in the past right. I can apologize. I can, whatever it is, I can change. That's a way more empowering way. Lovely. To look at life, and in my opinion. And I do that now. Another thing I didn't like about this idea of forgiveness through a blood sacrifice is that I just wasn't enough as I am. And this idea that God was only accepting me because when he looked at me, he saw Christ. There's this weird feeling that I used to get. Does God actually love me? Because Christ died for me so that I would be accepted. Christ's blood covers me so that I can be accepted. So does God actually really like me, love me, accept me? My sense of humor, my flaws, like there's something really beautiful in this relationship that I have with my husband is a good example of that, of accepting somebody and all of their flaws, like all the stuff that comes with them. And you start to just love the things about them that maybe they don't love about themselves, or that makes them hard to get along with other people. Like I know my husband loves things about me that other people probably can't stand. But that has bonded me to him. And that's made me really appreciate his love that much more, because he sees me for who I am and he accepts all of me. That is powerful. And I never really got that feeling from God. I felt like the only reason he could accept me on Judgment Day is because of Christ, and he didn't actually really love me. Not me, Also, forgiven for what? Exactly. I was taught that we're depraved at our very nature. We all fell in Adam. We all have a sin nature, and our default is deserving to go to hell. and God would be justified sending everyone to hell, but he's merciful in allowing even some of us to be saved. So that's something I heard a lot, which I just think is so fucked up. Oh, you're worried about other people going to hell? Well, we all deserve to go to hell. At least be glad that God lets some of us go to heaven. The lack of empathy, I think it just is so, I don't know. I want to be fair here. Maybe there's something that I'm missing there, which it's actually beautiful. Like, no, we all deserve hell, but God saved some of us. I just don't see it. I don't see how that is anything but horrifying and incredibly invalidating and incredibly unempathetic. I don't see it actually any other way currently, but I am open to being, told how I'm wrong there if anyone wants to do that. But yeah, like, forgiven for what? I was told I nailed the nails into Jesus. I was there spiritually crucifying him. It's my fault, and my sin is the reason that Jesus had to die on the cross. And just a lot of blame. When I was a kid, I was being taught this as a child. I'm like, man, let's see, the worst thing that I've done is, okay, well, I told my sibling I hated them when we got into a fight. Oh, and there's that verse that says, if you hate your brother, I think you're a murderer or something. And so I was like, okay, so I'm actually a murderer. So there were just a lot of things I was telling myself to convince myself that I was a terrible person. And that's why a blood sacrifice was necessary. At such a young age, like, why was that? I really wish that I had been told, like, no, you're good, you're kind, you're sweet, you are worthy of love, you're worthy of respect, you're worthy of wonderful things. God loves you because you're amazing. And I almost, as I'm saying them, I'm like, oh, blasphemy, anyways. But those are things that I would have felt comfortable saying to, like, my friends or another person. I just couldn't say it about myself. I never would have told another person, well, you deserve to burn in hell and I hope terrible things happen to you. But that's kind of what I thought I deserved. It's really odd, like, how I had that double standard in my head. I think it was because of this idea of, forgiveness for just being me, because me is evil. Also, this idea of forgiveness created this pressure within me to forgive others. And a really important clarification here that someone on TikTok commented, and I was like, yes, 100%. Forgiveness and reconciliation were conflated in my upbringing, my religious upbringing. I felt like, in order to forgive someone, you have to love them. You have to, like, hug them. You have to be happy to see them. There has to be reconciliation. I don't believe that anymore. And I think, forgiveness can be something you do from afar and that the person doesn't even have to know about, right? Reconciliation and forgiveness are not the same thing. And I just wish I would have known that. The fact that they were conflated literally just, like, clicked the other week. And I was like, oh, cool. Yeah, that would have been nice to know. Another problem with this idea of forgiveness is that Christ died for me, so I should be willing to die for him. I feel like I owed him something. Even though I didn't ask to be born, I didn't ask for him to die for me. I didn't ask for any of this, right? Like, I came into this earth innocent and not knowing any of this stuff, not of my own free will. So it doesn't even make sense for me to owe God something, especially since he is all powerful, all knowing, and all loving, and has all the power to give himself what he needs. Why does he need me to give him anything? But yeah, like, I felt this pressure to sort of prepare myself mentally for what it might be like to have to die for Christ in the Bible one day, because I was taught that Christians are going to be persecuted really, really badly, especially right before Jesus comes back. And so I remember just preparing myself, like, would you die? Like, if someone held a gun to your head and said, renounce Jesus, like, you can't do that, right? Because he died for you, and you would have to be willing to die for him. You can't be ashamed of him, otherwise he'd be ashamed of you. I don't think I needed to be thinking about that at 10 years old. All right, so that is it. This is a long one. I feel like this might be the longest one I've done. Maybe not. I feel like I've been talking for so long. My smoothie has just been sitting there literally, like, rotting. So I'm going to finish that. I appreciate you so much. If you've listened to the end, you're amazing. I love you. You're doing great. If you just started deconstructing, because I've seen a few people comment that, I just don't want you to get overwhelmed, because it can feel very overwhelming. And, like, I did it in a span of like 7 months. And when I say did it, I'm still deconstructing, but I went from Christian to atheist in about that time. You don't have to make any decisions about what your religious affiliation is, denomination, what you believe. You do not have to be making these big decisions. Give yourself as much space as you need to figure this stuff out. Do it in a way that feels right to you. There's no pressure, there's no rules. I would say the only rule is be gentle with yourself. That is a rule. Please be gentle with yourself. And I think that's it. Yeah, I've been talking enough. No more words need to be spoken. Love you. Yeah, that's it.